the brothers. My brother went on national TV to prove he was a woman. I don't know which talk show it was, but the episode had a title that kept flashing at the bottom of the television screen. Is she a he? Is he a she? You decide. The show went like this. A guest would come out on stage, and the audience would vote on whether or not she was the real thing. They came out one at a time, these big-haired and bright-lipped women, most of them taller than the average man. They worked the stage like strippers, bumping and grinding to the techno beat of the background music. The audience was on its feet, whistling and hooting and cheering them on. Then came Eric. My brother was different from the others. He was shorter, the only Filipino among them. He wore a denim skirt and a t-shirt, a pair of Doc Martens. His hair, a few strands streaked blonde, fell to his bony shoulders. He was slow across the stage, wooing the audience with a shy girl's face, flirtatious and sweet. But he wasn't woman enough for them. They booed my brother and gave him the thumbs down. So Eric fought back. He stood at the edge of the stage, fists on his hips and feet shoulder-width apart, like he was ready to take on anyone who crossed him. "Dare me?" he said, and I saw his hands move slowly to the bottom of his t-shirt. "You dare me?" They did dare him, and up it went. The crowd screamed with approval and gave him the thumbs up. Someone threw a bra on stage, and Eric picked it up, twirled it over his head like a lasso, then flung it back into the audience. I looked over at Ma. It was like someone had hit her in the face. He put his shirt down, lifted his arms in triumph, and blew kisses to the audience, then took a seat with the others. He told the audience that his name was Erica. He'd left a message the night before it aired, telling me to watch Channel 4 at 7 o'clock that night. He said it would be important and that Ma should see it too. When I told Ma, she looked hopeful. "Maybe he's going to sing," she said. "Maybe he'll play the piano." She was thinking of Eric from long before, when he took music lessons and sang in the high school choir. I reached for the remote thinking, that bastard set us up. I turned off the TV. That was the last time I saw Eric. Now he's lying on a table, a sheet pulled to his shoulders. The coroner doesn't rush me, but I answer him quickly. "Yes," I say, "that's my brother." Eric's life was no secret, though we often wished it was. We knew about the boyfriends, the makeup, the dresses. He told me about his job at the Who's Who, a bar in downtown San Francisco where the waitresses were drag queens and transsexuals. But a year and a half ago on Thanksgiving, when Eric announced that he was going to proceed with a sex change, "Starting here," he said, patting his chest with his right hand, Ma left the table and told Eric that he was dead to her. It's 6:22 p.m. He's been dead for 6 hours. "You need to call people," I tell Ma. But she just sits there at the kitchen table, still in her waitress uniform, whispering things to herself, rubbing her thumb along the curve of Eric's baby spoon. Next week she turns 61, and for the first time, she looks older than she is. "We have to tell people what happened," I say. She puts down the spoon and finally looks at me. "What will I say?" she asks. "How can I tell it?" "You tell them what the coroner told me, that's all. My brother had an asthma attack, rare and fatal. He was sitting on a bench in Golden Gate Park when his airways swelled so quickly, so completely, that no air could get in or out. As a kid, Eric's asthma was a problem. I can still hear the squeal of his panic. I can't breathe," he would say, and I'd rub his back and chest like I was giving him life. But as an adult, the attacks became less frequent, easier to manage, and he declared his inhaler a thing of the past. The severity of this attack was unusual, the coroner explained. No way he could have prepared for it. He was dead by the time a pair of 10-year-olds on rollerblades found him. The look on my mother's face makes me feel like I'm a liar. "He couldn't breathe," I say. "It's the truth." I go through cupboards, open drawers, not sure what I'm looking for, so I settle for a mug and fill it with water, and though I'm not thirsty, I drink it anyway. "He couldn't breathe," I say, "and then he died. When people ask, that's what you tell them." Ma picks up the spoon again, and now I understand. "Ang bunso ko," she's been saying in Tagalog. My baby boy, over and over, like Eric died as a child, and she realized it only now. The morning after the show, my brother called me at work. When I picked up, he said, "Well?" like we were in mid-conversation, though we hadn't spoken in 6 months. "You grew your hair out," I said. "It's blonde." "Extensions," he said. "They look real." "They're not." He took a deep breath. "But the rest of me is." It was a little after 7 in the morning. I was the only one in the office. Not even the tech guys were in yet. I turned and looked out my window down at the street, which was empty too. "God damn it, Edmund," my brother said. "Say something." I didn't, so he did. He said he was sorry if it hurt Ma and me, but this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. "I showed the world what I'm made of," he said. He said this slowly, like it was a line he'd been rehearsing for months. "What do you think of that?" "I saw nothing," I said. "What?" I saw nothing. It was the truth. When Eric lifted his shirt, they didn't simply cover his breasts with a black rectangle. They didn't cut to commercial or pan the camera to a shocked face in the audience. Instead, they blurred him out, head to toe. It looked like he was disintegrating molecule by molecule. They blurred you out, I said. I could hear him pace his apartment. I'd never visited, but I knew he was living in the Tenderloin in downtown San Francisco. The few times he called, there were always things happening on his end. Cars honking, sirens, people shouting and laughing. But that morning, there was just the sound of us breathing, one, then the other, like we were taking turns. I imagined a pair of divers at the bottom of the ocean, sharing the same supply of air. Are you there? I finally said. Eric, are you there? No, he said, then hung up. And that's how it ended, for Eric and me. I go to my apartment to get my clothes, but stay the night at Ma's. My old bed is still in my old room upstairs, but I take the living room couch. I don't sleep, not for a minute. Somehow, in the morning, I'm wide awake. Driving to the funeral home in North Oakland, I don't even yawn. Loomis, the man who handled Dad's funeral 11 years ago, waits for us in a small square of shade outside the main office. He's heavier now, his hair thinner, all white. Back then, he walked with a limp. Today, he walks with a cane. Do you remember me? It's the first thing Ma says to him. And my husband? She pulls a picture from her wallet, an old black and white of Dad back in his Navy days. He's wearing fatigues, looking cocky. His arms hang at his sides, but his fists are clenched like he's ready for a fight. Dominguez, first name Teodoro, do you remember? Loomis takes the photo and holds it eye level and squints. I do remember him, he says, though he saw my father only as a corpse. And I remember you, too. He looks at me and shakes my hand, the boy who never left his mother's side that whole time. That was Eric. Ma knows it, too, so we don't correct him. Back home, Ma calls the people we couldn't reach last night, and each conversation is the same. She greets them warmly, pauses, but can't catch herself before she gives into tears. Meanwhile, I get the house ready, vacuuming upstairs and downstairs, wiping dirty window screens with wet rags, rearranging furniture to accommodate the foot traffic of all the guests who will pray for my brother's soul. This will be the first of 9 nights like this. I hate the way Filipinos die, Eric once said. It was the week of Dad's funeral. 9 nights of praying on our knees, lousy Chinese food, and 100-year-old women keep asking me where my girlfriend is. The businessmen were worse. On the last night of Dad's novena, one guy, he said he was related to us but couldn't explain how, tried selling life insurance to Eric and me. He quoted figures on what we could get for injury, dismemberment, death, and even took out a pocket calculator to prove how valuable our lives were. Promise me, Edmund, Eric had said. When I die, take one night to remember me, that's all. No old people, no kung pao chicken, no assholes telling you how much you'll get for my severed leg. He came close to crying, but he managed to smile. And make sure Village People is playing in the background. YMCA? Macho Man, he said. Play it twice. He started laughing. I started laughing. The house was full of mourners, but we stood our ground in the corner of the room, matching in our Sears-bought two-piece suits, joking like the closest of brothers. But now I know we were wrong to talk like that, as though I would automatically outlive him. I was 5 years older than Eric, and he was only 26. Brothers are supposed to die in the correct order. I keep thinking, tonight should be for me. What started as praying is now a dinner party. Mom makes sure the egg rolls stay warm, but there's enough soy sauce in the chow mein, and that there's enough soy sauce in the chow mein. I hear her swap recent gossip with neighbors who moved away long ago, watch her hold babies of women who grew up on her street. In the Philippines, my parents threw 3 to 4 parties a year, and Ma boasted how her wedding was the grandest her province had ever seen. She promised equally grand weddings for us. But I was 21 when Delia and I eloped, and she gave up on Eric long ago. Funerals and novenas, I think, are all my mother has left. People keep coming. I try to stay close to familiar faces. I comfort Mrs. Gonzalez, Eric's second-grade teacher, who's brought the crayon portraits Eric drew for her on paper sacks. I talk with Isaac Chavez, Eric's best friend from grade school, the first boy Eric confessed to me later he ever loved. He never told Isaac, maybe I should, but when Isaac introduces me to his new life, I see no need to complicate his night. Later, when the Mendoza brothers walk in, I stay away. A long time ago, at a 4th of July picnic, they found Eric under the slide by himself, making daisy chains, singing love songs at the top of his lungs. I watched as they called him a girl, a sissy, a faggot. That's what you get for playing with flowers, I told Eric later. Ma catches me in the kitchen. We're out of ice, she says. Beside her is a Filipino woman rattling melting ice cubes in her plastic cup. She looks like she came to dance instead of pray. Her black hair falls in waves past her shoulders, and her tight black dress is cut above the knee. In her high-heeled boots, she's taller than almost anyone here. No problem, I say. I take the cooler from the kitchen, step outside. The freezer's in the backyard, and its low hum is the only sign of life out there. The grass is weeds, Ma's roses are gone, and the 4 stalks of sugarcane Dad planted when he bought the house, one for each of us, have been dead sticks for years. I take out a blue bag of ice, pound it against the concrete, breaking it up. Behind me, the glass door slides open. It's the woman in the tight black dress. Is this okay? She asks. She means the cigarette between her fingers. I slide the door shut. It is now. I'm Raquel, she says. Edmund. We shake hands. Oh, you're the brother. She lets go. Cold. Icy flakes stick to my fingers. I wipe them on my pants. So you're friends with Eric? Sisters, she says. That's what we call ourselves anyway. She lights the cigarette, takes a drag, then lets out a long breath of smoke. I have no family here. They're all back in Manila, pissed at me for leaving. So she became my sister. It's sweet, huh? Sisters, she. I feel like I'm being tested on what I know and don't know about my brother. Eric always wanted a sister, I say. Well, if we're sisters, she says, then that makes you my Kuya Edmund, right? Kuya? That's Tagalog for big brother. Without asking, she unfolds a lawn chair and sits down. She crosses her legs, rests an elbow on her knee, her chin on her hand, and looks at me closely. How are you? She asks. Not even the coroner asked me that, even after I saw the body. Fine, I say. I squat down and smash more ice. I'm holding up. Not me. Last night, when you left that message at the bar, I wanted to erase it. I was thinking, I don't know anyone named Eric, and I don't know an Eric's brother, but I knew who you meant. She describes the rest of the night, how they closed the Who's Who early, gathered the waitresses and the regulars together, drank and wept and sang songs until morning. Before everyone went home, they stood in a circle on the dance floor, held hands and said a prayer, music off but lights on, disco balls spinning above them. It looked like heaven, Raquel says. All the girls wanted to come tonight, but I told them no, it should just be me, out of respect for your mom. It's like the start of a joke. A dozen drag queens walk in on 80 Filipinos praying on their knees. And I can picture the rest of it. 6-foot-tall women in 6-inch heels, glittering in a crowd of people dressed in black. I can see the stares and hear the whispers, Ma in the middle of it all, wishing them away. But maybe everyone would have been fooled and taken them as the very girlfriends that old ladies had pestered Eric about. Right away, I knew what Raquel was, but so much of her looks real, like she was born into the body she's made. You're staring at my tits, hun, she says. The ice slips from my hands, slides across the cement onto the dirt. She manages a smile and shrugs. People look all the time. She glances at them herself. 4 years ago, when I came to the States, she gestures at her breasts like she's trying to display them. There's nothing here, just flat, all empty. So now, if people want to look, I let them. They're mine, right? She puts out her cigarette and lights another. It's the same thing with Erica. Her breasts turned out really, really nice. More ice? I say. I reach for another blue bag. There's more ice. She reaches out, puts her hand on my shoulder. I've embarrassed you, hun. Sorry. That wasn't Coke in my cup. Raquel pulls a silver flask from her purse and unscrews the top and holds it upside down. All gone, she sighs. I should be gone too. She gets up, but she's off balance. Walk me to the door. She puts her hands on my wrists and holds it tight. I don't know that I have a choice. We step inside and work our way through the crowds in the kitchen, the living room. People look, but they don't stare, and I think we can slip out quietly. But then I see the Mendoza brothers on the couch, eyeing Raquel, smirking at one another. My guess is that they've gone from childhood bullies to the kind of men who would follow a girl to her car with whistles and catcalls. I help Raquel with her coat. I'll walk you to your car. I'm at the end of the street, she says. We step outside and walk down the driveway. Raquel takes my arm again, her hold tighter this time. Maybe you should have had Coke after all, I say. No, she says, I need to be this way tonight. We get to her car, a beat-up Honda dented all over, with a missing back window replaced with plastic and duct tape. Time for you to go back home, she says, leaning against the door. She searches her purse for her keys, not realizing she's holding them in her hand. Then she says, oh shit. I see it. On the corner, 7 women, tall and big as Raquel, empty out of a minivan and head toward Ma's house, their heels clicking loudly against the sidewalk. I told them they shouldn't come, Raquel says. She takes a step toward them, but I don't let her go. It's not our problem, I say, then take the keys from between her fingers, walk her to the passenger door. I unlock it for her, then get into the driver's seat. What about your guests? Raquel asks. I don't have any guests. I start the car and watch the women enter Ma's house one by one. So where are we going? I say. San Francisco. I drive down Telegraph Avenue and head for the bridge. You're a nice man, Kuya Edmund. Raquel reclines her seat, turns toward the window like she's watching the moon. Can I call you that, Kuya? Why not? No one else will, and Eric never did. It's less than 10 minutes from Ma's house to the bridge, and yet I never cross it. Yesterday, when I drove to ID the body, was the first time in years I'd been to San Francisco. The time before that was when Ma kicked Eric out. He was 17. She found him in his bedroom, made up as a girl, in bed with a guy. She told him to leave and told Eric not to come back. For good this time, Eric said on the phone, but there's nowhere for me to go. He was breathing fast and heavy, trying not to cry. When I got to the house, Eric was sitting on the curb, a suitcase and an orange sleeping bag at his feet. He looked up at me, and what I thought were bruises was just makeup smeared together. She's tried wiping it off with a dish rag, he explained. I look awful, don't I? Get in the car, I said, then went inside to check on Ma. She was sitting at the top of the stairs, still in her Denny's uniform, Dad's terry cloth robe draped over her lap. She'd just gotten home from a late shift when she found Eric. I brought home a sandwich for him, she said. He doesn't want to take it. If you're hungry, I'm not hungry, I said. She nodded, went to her room. I heard her lock the door. I went back outside and got in the car. Eric was in the passenger seat, putting on lipstick. I grabbed his wrist, squeezed so hard he dropped it. Didn't I tell you? I was shouting now. You don't do this here. You want to play dress-up, that's fine, but not in Ma's house. You keep it to yourself. I'm not playing dress-up, Eric said. I started driving. Just tell me where to go. Eric gave directions, and before I realized it, I was on the Bay Bridge, bound for the city. He had a friend with a spare couch who lived in the Mission. I headed down South Van Ness, turned onto a dark street that got darker the farther down we went. Stop at the next house, Eric said. I pulled up in front of an old peeling Victorian. Here, I said, and I put 4 $20 bills in his hand. He gave one of them back, reminded me that Mother's Day was coming up, and asked if I could get Ma some flowers. He got out of the car, but before he closed the door, he leaned in. It was the first perfect night I ever had, he said. You know what I mean? I didn't. Call me in a few days, I said. Eric walked toward the front door, dragging his things behind him. At the top of the driveway, he turned around. We looked at each other, as though neither of us knew who should be the first to go. What I wished then, I'm wishing now, that I'd reached over and opened the passenger door. Maybe then we could have made our way back to Ma's, or to a place neither of us had been to before, an all-night diner off the freeway, a road that dead-ended with a view of the city. If we'd had more time, I could have taken him home. Maybe then things could have stayed the same. It took me hours to find my way back to the bridge. I tap Raquel on her shoulder. We're here, I say. Tell me where to go. For now, Raquel is homeless. A pipe burst in her apartment building 3 weeks before, flooding every unit. She'd been staying with Eric ever since. Had she said this before I got in her car, I'm not sure I would have driven her home. It takes 40 minutes to find parking, and when we do, it's blocks away from Eric's building. Walking, we pass drunken college boys negotiating with prostitutes, homeless kids sharing a bottle, cops who seem oblivious to everything around them. I get scared at night, Raquel says. I let her keep hold of my arm. Eric's building is on Pope Street. 2 teenage girls sit on the front steps smoking cigarettes. New boyfriend, Miss Raquel? One says. Ask me again in the morning and I'll tell you. Raquel laughs, high-fives both girls. We take the stairs to the 3rd floor, head down a narrow hallway lit by fading fluorescent lights. Eric's apartment number is 310. The door is white, like all the rest. I'd meant to visit, I say. Raquel says nothing. She takes the keys and lets me in. After you, Kuya. I don't know how I'm getting home, I suddenly realize. Those times I spoke to Eric, I imagined him sitting on his windowsill and what his apartment might look like. Wigs and dresses piled on a red leather couch, Christmas lights framing every window, drooping down from the ceiling. It was the kind of place where I would stand in the middle with my arms folded against my chest, careful not to touch anything. I'd keep an eye on the door, ready to escape at any moment. But when I step inside, everything is muted. There's a metal desk, a cream-colored futon, a cinder-block shelf with a stack of newspapers and magazines. On the windowsill are 2 framed pictures. One is of Ma and Dad in Long Beach when they first came to the States, and the other is of me, from a time I don't remember. I'm just a kid, 4 or 5 years old, looking unbelievably happy. I don't know how and I don't know why. It seems impossible to me that anyone could be that pleased with life. Raquel offers a tissue. I tell her I'm fine. She goes into the tiny refrigerator beneath the desk and takes out a Mountain Dew and a small bottle of vodka. She mixes them in a paper cup and stirs it with her finger. Then she takes out a bottle of pills from her purse. Headache? I ask. There's nothing wrong with my head, she says. She pops a pill in her mouth, sips her drink, makes a face when she swallows like it hurts. Hormones, she says. No pain, no gain. She takes another sip. So there's pain. Figure of speech, Kuya. It goes down easy. There must be pain, I say. There has to be. I think of Eric on a table, surgeons cutting into his body, needles vanishing into his skin. I think of that studio audience giving him the thumbs down, like a jury deciding his fate. I think of Ma telling Eric he was dead. The things you do, I say, to prove yourself. We loved him as he is. That should have been enough. Raquel walks over and stands in front of me eye to eye. You think that's why we do this? To prove a point to you? Listen, Kuya Edmund, all of this. She unfolds her arms, takes my hand by the wrist, and puts it on the center of her chest. All of this I did for me. She keeps it there, presses it into herself like I'm supposed to check for a heartbeat, but she lets me go before I can feel anything. I should get back home, I say. She nods and walks me to the door. I make a plan to stop by next week to pick up some of Eric's things, and she says yes, of course, any time, but she doesn't believe that I'll ever return here. Just as I walk out the door, she hands me $40 for the cab ride back to Oakland and refuses to take it back. You brought me home, she says. If you didn't, I could be dead too. She starts crying, then puts her hand on my face. I don't come closer, but I don't pull away either. She loves you, she whispers, okay? Then she holds me, her body pressing against mine. I wonder if this is how Eric felt after he changed, if the new flesh made him feel closer to the person he held. I won't ever know, but I wish I could stay this way a little longer and listen to Raquel whisper about my brother the way she just did, in the present tense, like he's still going on. The next morning, Ma's sitting at the bottom of the stairs, a vinyl garment bag over her lap. Eric's body is being prepared for tonight's viewing. We need to deliver his clothes. She says nothing about the girls from the Who's Who, and she doesn't ask me where I went last night. But on the way to the funeral home, I can feel her staring at me like she's waiting for me to confess to something I didn't do. Loomis is waiting in the lobby. We've set up a room, Mrs. Dominguez, he says. We follow him through the lobby, but pass his office and continue down the hallway. There's a phone inside if you need anything, he says. We stop in front of a metal door. He looks serious, like he's worried for us. It's not too late to change your mind. Ma shakes her head. Loomis takes a breath and nods. All right, then. He turns to me. It's good that you're here, he says, then leaves. Ma opens the door. I close it behind us. Eric lies on a metal table with wheels, a gray sheet covering him from the neck down. A strand of his hair hangs just over the edge, the darkest thing in this white room. I can see the incision on his neck, the thread keeping his lips shut. Ma takes the garment bag away from my hands. She goes to Eric. I stay by the door. They have staff who can do this, I tell her. She hangs the bag on a hook on the wall and unzips it. It's a suit, one of Dad's. We have to change him, she says. Ma puts her hand on Eric's right arm, rubs it up and down, the sheet still between them. She bends over, whispers Ang Bunsoko, between kisses to his cheek, his forehead, his cheek again, weeping the whole time. For a moment I mistake this for tenderness, her gesture of amends, a last chance to dress him the way she did when he was a boy. Then she stands up straight, wipes her eyes, breathes in deep, and pulls several rolls of ace bandages from her purse. Now I understand. She lifts the sheet, folds it neatly down his abdomen. For the first time we see them, his breasts. They look cold and hard and dead as the rest of him, like they've always belonged to his body. If this was how he wanted to live, then this was how he wanted to die. Lift his arms, Ma says. I don't move. This will work, she says. I saw it on TV. Women who try to look like men, this is what they do. You can't do this. Everyone will see him tonight, Ma says, unrolling a bandage. I tell her to forget tradition and custom, to keep the casket closed. You picked out a nice casket for him, Mom. Beautiful flowers. I keep my voice calm and move toward her slowly, like a person trying to save someone from jumping off the ledge of a skyscraper. They won't see him, I say. They won't know. I will, she says. I reach for her arm, but she pulls back. She steps around, stands behind Eric's head, slips her hand beneath his shoulders, manages to raise Eric a few inches from the table, but he slips from her. Ma tries again, her arms shaking from the weight of him, but she's just not strong enough. Please, she says, looking at me. One way or another, she means to do this, and she'll only hurt herself in the end. I walk over to the body. The light in here is different than it was in the morgue. Yesterday, the room seemed lit by a gray haze, and it took me only a second to recognize my brother. Today, the light makes shadows on his face, and I notice the sharpness of his cheekbones, the thin arch of his eyebrows. His lips are fuller than I remember, his neck more narrow. It's still him, I say, but Ma doesn't believe me. His body is hard from the embalming fluid, and he's heavier than I expected. To hold him up, I have to slip my arms beneath his, fold them across his chest. I can feel him, and I don't care how we look. We are together, and we should stay this way for all the moments we can. We have been apart for so long, soon he'll be gone for good. Leave him alone, I say, but my mother doesn't listen, and then her hands separate me from my brother as she works the bandage round and round his breasts. I kiss the back of his neck, just once, in love and in apology. Ma keeps going, another bandage and then one more, so tight the breasts vanish back into him like they never existed. If my brother were alive, he wouldn't be able to breathe. I say nothing to Ma on the way back to her house, and I let her off at the bottom of the driveway. Then I make my way back to Telegraph Avenue, heading for the bridge. I find my way to the Tenderloin, and, as if it was meant to be, I find a parking spot right in front of Eric's building. I hurry inside, past the same two girls on the doorstep from last night, run up the 3 flights of stairs, down the hall to the end. I knock on the door. "Who is it?" Raquel says. "Edmund," I say, "the brother," and she opens to me. Thank you.